So I am happy to be here talking today with Justin Harvey, who is a financial advisor and the founder of a company called APM Wealth, based in Oregon. In particular, Justin's practice focuses heavily on working with anesthesiologists and pain management physicians, although I do know that he makes some exceptions and works with other medical specialists. Um, the reason I wanted to have this conversation is, and I think the audience knows, is this is really a topic that is very far afield from my own practice, right? So I represent large hospital-based groups, sort of highly entrepreneurial surgeons who have their fingers in lots of different sorts of activities. But the one thing I have never involved myself in is any client's sort of personal wealth planning, their estate planning. I know very little about these topics, which is why I thought that having Justin on would be of interest to the people that follow me. Um, when Justin and I, or when you and I, spoke about what to talk about, a few weeks ago when we were doing the planning, we came up with the notion of centering on, having hard money conversations to keep your family together. Uh, Personally, I think it's a great place to start. And I welcome you, Justin, to share your experience with us. If you'd like to give any further introduction about yourself and your practice now, great. And if not, why don't we sort of start with why successful physicians might avoid or have difficulty talking with their families about wealth and inheritance and these topics. So take it away.
Mark, I'm really happy to be speaking with you today.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. It was a pleasure to have met you in person in Vegas a
Oh,
few weeks ago at the medical conferences we were both attending.
yeah, it was good.
And this is a topic I'm so passionate
Yeah.
about, is the successful creation of a healthy
Mhm,
culture
mhm,
within a family about money.
yeah.
Because whether you come from a lot or a little,
Mhm,
any background can create its own unique built-in challenges. And if you're a physician, especially if you're a
mhm,
high-income specialist physician or
mhm,
a business owner or a physician business owner,
mhm,
um, there are complexities to the way that you interact with your money that if you don't address them, and there are actually like sort of predispositions to messing things up that humans
mhm,
have. And just because you have an undergraduate degree in biology and a medical degree and a couple board
mhm,
certifications and many years of experience in attendinghood, it doesn't
mhm,
mean that you're any less likely to make some of these
mhm.
mistakes for which you're
Yeah.
hardwired. And I liken it to, if you're a football team and you're driving down the field, you get to the 2 yard line and you spike the football and you think you got a touchdown. If you don't create a healthy money culture within your
Mhm,
family to create that successful passing of the baton, you didn't get the touchdown.
mhm,
You spiked the ball on the 2 yard line, and now you've created a situation in which your family may, I mean, at worst, to take an extreme example, like your
mhm,
kids are going to hate you,
mhm,
relationships become fractured. Now they don't talk to each other,
mhm.
and there's bitterness,
Right.
resentment. There's wondering, did dad really love me? He cut me out of this business, or
Mhm,
there was a big illiquid asset that wasn't properly dealt with,
mhm,
or there's language in the trust that creates inequitable outcomes.
mhm,
And apart from proactive communication, I mean,
mhm,
like worst case scenario is there's no communication between
mhm.
Gen 1 and Gen 2.
Okay.
And now the family is like after the funeral trying to figure out what the paperwork means. And
Yeah.
everyone is projecting the worst, perhaps, if there's not a
Mhm,
real solid foundation of love and understanding. And that can be so damaging, so
mhm,
detrimental. And an important part of my job in
mhm,
caring for families multi-generationally is
mhm,
allowing these moments of transition to be like we're super gluing and duct taping people
mhm.
together relationally. It's a moment of creating more like enhancing the trust that already exists and
Mhm,
reinforcing the values that you've cultivated rather than fracturing them. But it takes
mhm.
planning, takes conversations in
Okay.
advance to make sure that that is in fact the outcome.
Mhm. Do Is there something special about physicians in having these sorts of discussions, as opposed to, I don't know, accountants? And is there anything? Do you think there's something special about it? I mean, I know that you focus on working with physicians and, in particular, on certain specialists, but is there something special?
There's a few different, I would say, prototypes,
Mhm.
and doctors are just people, you know. They're very, very smart, specialized people in particular areas. In some cases, they have an intellectual humility that allows them to say, "Hey, I know that I'm good at this, but I'm not good at that, and I
Mhm.
know that I need somebody like
Mhm.
Mark to help shepherd me through this
Yeah.
complex business agreement. I need somebody like Justin to help me build
Mhm.
wealth intelligently, and I need also, a supporting cast
Mhm.
of professionals to do the things I'm not good at." In some cases, there is what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you think
Mhm.
you're good at one
Yeah.
thing, and therefore you project that expertise into every other domain.
Yeah.
I don't know that medicine is more
Mhm.
predisposed to that than
Yeah.
other
Mhm.
professions of smart people, but
Right.
I certainly observe that in
Yeah.
some cases. And I would say uh, the 80-20 rule in finance applies.
Mhm.
I was actually talking to someone recently who is very successful, a business owning physician, and has amassed an 8-figure
Mhm.
net worth, and
Mhm.
they've never had an advisor. And this person is now getting to that point of getting ready to retire. And they've done the 20%. Like they just haven't done anything really stupid.
Mhm.
They haven't
Mhm.
blown up their plan. They've literally
Right.
bought index funds for the last 30 years.
Mhm.
And turns out the S&P 500 was a good place to be invested the
Yeah.
last 3 decades. And it's paid dividends. No pun intended.
Yeah.
Actually, I did intend that pun. But now
Yeah.
this physician actually has the intellectual humility to
Mhm.
say, I perceive that what got me here
Mhm.
won't get me there. And it's
Mhm.
actually a different skill set to
Mhm.
decumulate and to transition assets
Right.
than it is to amass them.
Mhm.
And now it's time to get somebody else involved. So there are cases where that intellectual humility allows for
Yeah.
the preservation of assets through, like,
Mhm.
because it does get more complicated now. In
Right.
your 50s and in your 60s,
Mhm.
a lot of stuff happens. There's a lot of planning opportunity. There's a lot of
Mhm.
things that you can do to, if you haven't already had those conversations
Yeah.
with the next generation, to begin to
Mhm.
say, hey, here's something you need to know about dad.
Mhm.
I've amassed some wealth. I have some ideas about what I want to happen. Here's how things look right
Mhm.
now. And there's degrees of transparency. I'd say always be honest, and transparency in degrees as you are
Mhm.
able, based on your relationships and based on what your kids can handle and how old they are, to let them know what's coming. Because you don't want to blindside
Right.
your heirs, whether good or bad, because
Mhm.
that's just going to create
Mhm.
it's much more likely to create an unsuccessful outcome.
Is there an age, and we could pick the, I don't know. I don't actually, I'm just gonna, we could pick the physician's age, the client's age, or perhaps better said, is it the children's age? Um, when one should start thinking about having these conversations and planning for having these conversations.
I have 3 boys, the
Okay.
eldest of which is in kindergarten.
Okay.
I'm having these conversations now. There's actually this
Ah,
great book. Let me grab it. It's on my bookshelf.
yeah.
Called It's called The Opposite of Spoiled by this guy named Ron Lieber, who's he's a New York Times columnist, like personal finance
Yeah.
writer. And the subtitle is Raising Kids Who Are Grounded, Generous, and Smart About Money. So certainly if you have young kids,
Hmm.
it's a great time to start that dialogue. There's a great analogy or great anecdote told in this book about, it's a high income family,
Mhm.
and uh, the dad wants to help his kids understand, you know, what is the context for our family economic experience? Because,
Mhm.
like, yeah, dad makes a bunch of money and we're, I guess, rich, but I don't, there's no context as a seventh
Mhm.
grader. So the dad goes to the bank and gets a duffel bag full of $1 bills, equating to 1 month's worth of compensation.
Okay.
And he comes home with a duffel bag and says, all right, kids, sit down at the kitchen table, unzip the bag, say, dad makes $47,321 a month. And this duffel bag is all the $1 bills that I made in the last 30 days. And I want you to know, here's all the things that is on dad's mind as I'm thinking about this
Mhm.
$47,000. And here's the index card. It says IRS, federal government. Put that there. You got your state income tax, you got your local wage tax,
Mhm.
you got your FICA, you got your 401k, you got your mortgage. And so the $1 bills are going
Right.
into all these piles.
Mhm.
And now at the end of the exercise, you don't just have, oh, dad makes $47,000. You have an experiential understanding of,
Mhm.
wow, all right. So it's not just that we're rich because we make a lot of money. There's complexity to
Mhm.
having a high income,
Right.
and there is mental load associated with administering it. And
Mhm.
starting to understand, because what I want for my kids and what I want for my clients' children is that successful generational transfer of value around money, meaning
Hmm.
I appreciate it. I understand it's hard to get,
Right.
it's hard to keep, got to work hard for it. And if you have it, you're privileged and lucky
Mhm.
to enjoy it. And you got to work hard to protect it. And beginning that dialogue as early as possible through like allowance, you give your kid a couple bucks a week. That's great. And
Mhm.
then, for your 25 and 30-year-old children, obviously there's a more mature version of that where we're talking about family legacy and talking about higher education expenses,
Mhm.
buying a first house, and the family participation in that. So it evolves over time.
Mhm. Um, what about, okay, let's take your avatar position, the guy who's amassed the 8 figures of wealth and is now saying, geez, I got to start thinking about this transition, about this sort of family wealth legacy. How does somebody who is older, who hasn't had money conversations with his or her kids, how do they start?
It's a great question. Better late than never.
Yes.
The best time to plant an oak tree is 20 years ago, and the
Yeah.
second best time is today.
Yeah.
So I think with that understanding that we're all humans, we all have insecurities,
Hmm.
we all have
Hmm.
baggage, and we all have an
Right.
emotional background. Like
Hmm.
if you've never talked about money with your kids, I would wager your parents never talked with you about money.
Yeah.
So understanding your
Probably.
own story, giving yourself some
Hmm.
grace and forgiveness to say,
Right.
maybe this is an area where I haven't helped my
Hmm.
kids. But you know what? Good news. You can do it today.
Hmm.
And acknowledging that up front, it's not easy always to
Hmm.
humbly express a shortcoming if that's what it
Yeah.
is. And there's a lot of reasons why someone might not want to do this. But I'd say just be honest about here's where we're at. Here's something I think is important. I've never done this with you, but I think in order to equip you for the real world, we should have a conversation
Hmm.
and creating space. So maybe it's a meal out somewhere where there's no distraction, or maybe it's a trip or a hike. We're in the Northwest here, so it's like
Hmm.
you can go out to one of the local waterfalls,
Yeah.
and over the couple mile journey, you're
Hmm.
you're not distracted, and you're sharing some of your story, and you're sharing some of your economic reality,
Hmm.
and in the process, you're sharing the values. Like, is money important to you? Why is money important to you? What does money
Hmm.
represent?
Yeah.
What did it take for you to get what you have? What were the
Hmm.
moments where you took a risk, where you spent that extra, all your friends finished training and they just went and got the big boy, big girl jobs, and you stuck around for an extra two
Hmm.
years to do that extra fellowship so that you could be more specialized, have a better career trajectory, better practice buy-in dynamic. Like,
Hmm.
what was that like for you? And in that sharing of identity,
Hmm.
the sharing of values. Hopefully, if you have, I mean, this requires a baseline level of trust
Yeah.
and of love. If your kids hate your guts, it's unlikely that this is going to change that. But there is a version of this that still I think could happen where there's more friction, shall we say? But that is that kind of sharing, that kind of background, I think is helpful for the kid to understand this is part of who I am. This is part of
Hmm.
my family story.
Hmm.
And then if saving is important, if security that comes from money is important, if there are themes like generosity, giving, serving in the community
Yeah.
that are all integrated economically, if those are important,
Hmm.
this is a time to talk about those things. And to the extent, if you're that 8 figure household, to the extent that you have specific desires for like what you want with the time that you have, there's another good book
Hmm.
called Die with Zero, which is sort of a taking the traditional financial advice and turning it on its head. And
Yeah.
it's kind of an extreme attention grabbing title. And the premise isn't actually die broke, but
Hmm.
the premise is if I'm a family with an 8 figure net worth and I'm, that 62-year-old physician who's thinking about intergenerational planning, maybe I shouldn't try to die with $40 million when I'm 90 and my kids are 70 and then they get the $40 million,
Hmm.
because they've lived their whole lives and they've gone through their 30s when they were in training and they needed
Right.
childcare and they were trying to pay for a wedding and they were
Right.
trying to buy a house and they just gutted it out all on their own on that
Hmm.
indentured servitude PGY salary.
Hmm.
And, that's fine. And that obviously you appreciate what you work for. But
Hmm.
if you're going to help your kids, if it is aligned with your values to say, hey, this is a part of how we share love in this
Mhm.
family is to participate in the big life events that you have, like helping you through with your wedding or your down payment.
Mhm.
Like, do it when you're 55.
Yeah.
Don't do it when you're 85 because
Yeah.
you're just,
Mhm.
even from a strictly mercenary standpoint,
Mhm.
if it's your money and if helping people around you makes you feel good and you're thinking, I just want to use all my money
Yeah.
to make me feel as good as possible, then helping people with it while you're young enough to observe the effects
Mhm.
of your generosity makes a lot of logical
Yeah.
sense. So I think having these conversations, these
Mhm.
are conversations I like to have with my clients, and then they can take their sort of codified thinking
Right.
around it and begin to communicate that to their heirs.
Okay. So, okay, so you work with your clients to help them plan for these conversations. Have you ever been, I mean, I'd like you to answer that, but have you ever also been present to help facilitate that conversation? I mean, I know that in some families, those conversations would be difficult. It might help to have a facilitator. In others, I guess the question is, do people have these conversations as a family? Or do mom and dad sit down with Sally and then sit down with Ben, separately?
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe the answer is, well, it all depends. I don't know.
Yeah, so this is actually I have this standing offer with many of my clients.
Yeah.
There's a number of these kind of milestone
Hmm.
conversations that I offer to either facilitate or
Right.
be present for, or even maybe coach through in the beginning. Like, I'll give you some talking points, and you're gonna have to
Right.
just, like, when you're around the Thanksgiving dinner
Hmm.
table, that's your moment, and you're gonna have to
Right.
do it. All of those permutations sort of
Hmm.
exist, and it also means sometimes I'm, talking to the 14-year-old about they just got their first job and their first paycheck, and
Yeah.
hey, let's set up your 401k. And
Right.
I love part of what makes my job.
Hmm.
I'm very relationally driven. What makes my
Yeah.
job rewarding is seeing that successful
Hmm.
baton pass
Hmm.
to say, oh, I can get this 14-year-old
Yeah.
to start using a Roth 401k when they're
Right.
14. That's
Hmm.
awesome. And for me, that's
Right.
I'm really blessed to have my father
Hmm.
help me do that when I was,
Right.
bussing tables at Eaton Park growing up in
Yeah.
Pittsburgh, making $6.25 and grinding for every penny of those dollars and open the Roth IRA and all
Right.
that stuff. So for me, I love doing that. But I don't minimize how
Hmm.
difficult it is to have this conversation, particularly if for you it represents a hard pivot. Like,
Yeah.
if you're in your 50s and your kids are in their
Hmm.
20s and
Hmm.
you don't have a meaningful baseline communication around the economics of your situation, then
Hmm.
this is going to be jarring.
Yeah.
But it's like any other important conversation.
Yeah.
Like, you can teach
Hmm.
them or the world will teach them.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
it's your values at stake and it's your kids' well-being at stake, like, it's
Hmm.
better to deal with the discomfort than to let
Hmm.
them get educated by the wild
Hmm.
out there.
Yeah. Are these conversations, um, are they one-offs? Let me get my light back on here. Are they one-offs, or do they open a series of discussions optimally that should continue moving forward?
Great question. In a perfect world, I think there's periodic revisiting of
Mhm.
important facets of the conversation. I don't think, we have to have, like, your bank statements CC'd to all your kids, but I think, like,
Mhm.
having some here's another example. I've got clients who are more in this example, they're like the Gen 2.
Mhm.
So mom and dad have means, and maybe you would be surprised, Mark, there's a lot of families like flying blind that are eight
Mhm.
or in some cases nine-figure families.
Mhm.
Meaning, I sold a business, I made $127 million, and
Mhm.
my kids are totally in the dark,
Mhm.
not only about our family circumstances, but frankly, about money in general.
Mhm.
And I want to have a kid. I want to buy a house. I'm like, we're stuck in this little shoebox of a row home, and I'm scraping by in a high cost of
Mhm.
living area. And I'm thinking, like, should I get way out over my skis with debt in
Mhm.
order to, like, start paying for a nanny and get maybe an extra bedroom? Not like we're going to be balling out, but like, we
Yeah.
need a little more living space. And
Mhm.
I am considering this decision. And I have this vague sense of, like, I know mom sold that business that she started for $127 million 4 years ago. And holy cow, like, $100,000 for a down payment would transform my
Yeah.
life.
Mhm.
But there's so much discomfort and awkwardness around this that I'm not even going to bring it up. I'm just going to do the thing, take on the debt, like figure it
Hmm.
out on my own. And again, that might be okay. And
Hmm.
maybe that's the path of maximum personal growth, which
Hmm.
great.
All
But
right.
if you're mom and you sold your business for $127 million and you want to help your kids in this way, now's the time. Don't leave them 127 million when you're dead, because they're not going to need it by the time they're 60 and have been saving diligently for
Yeah.
decades. So, um, and this is another way that I
Hmm.
sometimes going the other direction, going the Gen 2 to Gen 1
Hmm.
requires that sort of like going out on a branch emotionally and saying, "All right,
Yeah.
mom, dad," and I've coached my clients a bit
Hmm.
when they're the Gen 2 around this to similarly just be transparent. Like,
Hmm.
I'm not asking for anything necessarily, but I want to just observe and let you in on here's what my
Hmm.
life looks like. And maybe there's been some intimation in the past that you want to help us out. I don't want all your money when you're gone, but 100 grand right now would change my life. If you were ever going to do it, I'm open to
All
talking
right.
about what that could look like. And maybe even in a maybe it's not a gift, maybe it's a personal loan. There's ways to
Mhm.
you want to there's this balance, of self-disclosure and of making an ask but not making a presumption, because this is
Mhm.
another value that I have is like
Right.
it's not yours. It's mom's money. She sold the
Right.
business. She doesn't need to give you anything. If you made it through med school, she probably did her job.
Right.
But just
Mhm.
being transparent so that everyone has all the facts can allow people to express their values in ways that they feel compelled to. So a lot of the work that I
Yeah.
do in this dialogue is just
Hmm.
helping people be transparent about what's
Right.
going on and then let the values do the rest.
Have you experienced situations um, where children are not treated equally, whatever equally means, because the children may have different needs. So obviously, there are some people who have children with what we commonly call special needs, and I'm not talking about that. I think that's a different conversation. One, maybe it is, maybe it's not, but one that's easier for the siblings to understand. But within any family of more than one child, each kid is different. Each kid is going to have a different sort of career path. They're going to deal with money differently. They're going to have entirely different personalities, different outlooks on life. Um, does that, do those issues of quote fairness come into play? And again, I'm not even sure what it means to be fair in this circumstance. I know that many parents, from my purely anecdotal, I didn't try to run a survey, life experience is that they end up splitting things, three kids, a third, a third, a third, or they give something to the grandkids, and whether it's like a right of distribution or it's been like 40 years since law school, so I don't remember the right of distribution and the right of whatever it is. I think you know what I'm talking about, how money flows to a second generation. Um, you know, and just think that that's going to avoid problems. If one of your children uh, um, is a successful concert pianist and makes $600,000 a year, and the other one is opened a shoe store and really loves shoes and really is trying, but the shoe store squeaks by. Um, should you just say, well, heck, the shoe store owner is the one who needs help. The concert pianist has got it made. So, here, I'll give you enough money to polish your piano.
That's a great question. And one of the things that I've learned is that, man, every family's different and every family's got their own drama and their
Yeah.
own relational
Mhm.
tension and their own, addiction,
Right.
brokenness, their own darkness.
Hmm.
And the classic example is if you take $9 million of cash and you drop it on the proverbial kitchen table with these three
Hmm.
kids sitting around. In some cases,
Yeah.
it's like pulling a hand grenade and walking out of the room, and the devastation without a thoughtful implementation of passing that
Hmm.
baton with this $9 million is it's stark. It's really
Yeah.
really rough. So a lot of the protections that you can build in, you can be equitable while still being And this is where it's really, I'm not a lawyer. And I should have said this at the beginning. None of what preceded and none of what follows is legal advice. So please work with qualified counsel admitted to the bar in your state in order to get a solid estate plan. A lot of what I'm addressing is more the
Mhm.
familial and cultural considerations around
Sure,
asset
sure.
transfer. But this is where working with a good lawyer is just pays for
Mhm.
itself a bajillion times over.
Yeah.
And Mark, I asked you before we hit record, do you feel threatened by, ChatGPT these days? And it sounds like you don't. I
No.
got to say that I don't either. And I was talking to a counselor
Mm.
earlier, a therapist, and I
Mhm.
was saying, "Hey, Mike, do you ever feel threatened
Mhm.
by ChatGPT?" And similarly, he's like, "No one's taking advice from a robot that would also, they
Yeah.
think they need me still." And I say, "Yeah, I don't want to. I'm not going to ask a robot how to run my
Yeah.
life." So, in that context, working with a good lawyer to thoughtfully construct the right
Yeah.
instruments with the protections
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that if you have the kid that is gambling addicted, which by the way, I think is like a hidden epidemic that 5 years from now, we're going to
Yeah.
find out that everyone on their phones is doing way
Yeah.
more than we think. Or, drugs, or maybe their marriage is on the rocks and you want to make sure to
Mhm.
protect the asset
Mhm.
through your lineal
Right.
descendants in the event of divorce.
Mhm.
Thoughtful trust construction is a way to do this.
Yeah.
And in a way that also shows sort of an equality of the class of
Mhm.
your heirs
Mhm.
so that the one who's a little bit more the black sheep, they're not feeling like, oh, dad cut me out or
Mhm.
dad put all the strings attached to my money and
Mhm.
none of the others got the strings
Right.
attached. Like you can actually attach the strings equal, and there's reasons to do this that are
Mhm.
totally legitimate in terms of asset protection,
Mhm.
where you would have all the same strings for all the
Mhm.
kids. And where the strings need to be, where they need to
Mhm.
kick in, they can, so that your kid can't, bet $1 million on who's going to win the Super Bowl if that's what
Mhm.
their
Yeah.
proclivities
Well,
are.
that's
But
not
the
that's not
concert
gambling.
pianist,
That's a predictive market. That was supposed to be a joke.
yes,
Never mind.
yes. Well, I mean, it
Yeah.
could be a business investment depending on how much you know. Well, that's a
Yeah.
conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But work with a good lawyer, build
Yeah.
the thing in the right way, and this is important. And this is another, again,
Yeah.
it's a values-driven principle, and I would have a value, and I try to not project my values, Mark. And I'm
Mhm.
sure you wrestle with this. Like you have your
Yeah.
ideas about how business should work. I try to not assume that you want to
Mhm.
show all your kids that you love them.
Yeah.
Maybe there's one kid that really like should be cut out, and you have your own reasons for that. But if you want to be equitable, and I'm going to start with the assumption that you want to be equitable to all your
Mhm.
kids until you tell me
Mhm.
otherwise, then there are ways to do that that will give the kids the unique help that they may need
Mhm.
while still treating the class
Mhm.
equitably.
You see, what I find interesting about the conversation we're having is that, and you mentioned estate planning lawyers, and when I began my career, uh, the firm had a very well-known estate planning lawyer as one of the partners, and his clients were the very, 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 very rich sort. Uh, but from my experience as a baby lawyer working with him, because that was part of my training, which I've forgotten all of it, and I haven't touched anybody's estate plan in 30 years, and I'm not going to touch another one other than my own. But the work was more mechanical. There was counseling, but what it was counseling in the sense of, what do you understand what this means? And but what
Hmm.
it wasn't was the approach that I think that you offer, which is something different, which is when I think of advisors who counsel people on building wealth, I don't naturally connect that with the notion of, we built it. How can I help you either um, um, foresee what is going to happen 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the line? And how can I help you to think about these issues? How can I help you have these family conversations, which go well beyond this notion of estate planning? Because you could even go and do all your estate planning and never have a discussion with your family about what your plans for them are, which is probably a giant mistake, right? Because the famous situations of which I'm aware are the
Yes.
situations where extremely wealthy clients cut out some family member and they found out about it after the death,
Hmm.
or um, people who used their estate plan as a weapon, like as a
Hmm.
cudgel. Do what I say or else, right? Um, and these are all, super important topics. And I don't think there's enough awareness of the importance of having these discussions, and not just in the sense of this is what's going to happen when mommy and daddy die, but it's like, how do you blend that in with these notions of raising like financially capable children, right? Uh, should they really know how much they're going to inherit, right? Is dumping all this money on them, uh, I'm not, it's hard for me to say it, more harmful than not getting it. I have trouble with saying not getting it.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a whole bunch of issues here. And,
Yeah.
and right. And Bob or Sally, estate planning expert, probably isn't going to have a warm and fuzzy conversation with a client about that. Now, I'm sure I'm going to hear from some estate planning client, attorney who tells me I'm crazy. We have all these conversations all the time. If you say so, I believe you. So,
To be fair, Mark, a lot of advisors, the same way that I view estate planning attorneys as a relatively homogenous population with a few outliers that are
yeah.
excellent,
Mhm,
just because of my exposure. Financial advisory population is
mhm.
kind of, I mean, there's three or 400,000 financial advisors in
Yeah,
America. Are they all doing what I'm describing?
probably
No.
not.
A
Yeah,
vanishingly small percentage of them are, in my observation and experience, but some
yeah.
do. And those that have the longitudinal relationship and the trust
Hmm.
and frankly have the wisdom and the experience and have seen a little bit of life and have like been broken by life a few times
Hmm.
in their own ways, to humble them and help them have that like
Hmm.
real
Right,
tangible kind of gritty applicable. They
right.
know what to say in those moments, and they also know what they don't know.
Hmm.
Those are the ones that often create the kind of family
Hmm.
context that I'm talking about. And that's what we
Hmm.
try to do with our clients. I don't do that perfectly, but I'm a lot better
Right,
at it now than I used to
right,
be. And one of the great things about this profession is you continue to accumulate that valuable life
right.
experience to be able to offer that, it is,
Hmm.
yes, it's the execution of the plan. So I get a pile of
Right.
documents that my clients got prepared with a lawyer, and we're going to
Hmm.
update the title, we're going to update the beneficiaries, we're going to make
Hmm.
sure the life insurance looks the way it should. If there's new entities formed, we're going to fund those, and that's great. But it's also as their life changes, as things happen
Hmm.
with their kids, with their business, knowing
Right.
the intent and helping to continue to
Hmm.
implement,
Yeah,
that's really rewarding work and
yeah.
frankly, like an incredible value for the people that get it from the
Hmm.
right kind of advisor.
Right, right. So, sort of to wrap things up, what should someone, and if the avatar now is the physician, and for you and your practice it's an anesthesiologist or a pain medicine physician for the most part, uh, what should someone who say is a parent, or maybe not even a parent, right, because they're going to do something within maybe their extended family, but they're going to do something with their money, um, what should they do within the next 90 to 120 days if they've never considered this? Like, where do you start? The very basics. Or the next step usually is blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I would say I have two answers to this question. There's a relational conversational
Mhm.
component, and then there's a practical
Right,
paperwork component.
right.
And I'm going to assume that you've got something, like you
Right.
did wills, or there might be a trust out there
Okay.
somewhere. So the first thing I suggest that you do is figure out where, from A to Z, if you've gone all the way through the alphabet with your kids and they're like, you're up to speed, like figure out what letter on the alphabet your progress
Mhm.
is. And if you're at A and you've literally never had that conversation, that's okay. Figure out where you are and say, how do I get from A to C in the
Mhm.
next 3 months with my kids? And maybe that means creating the space, carving out the time, being
Mhm.
uninterrupted, put your phone in another room and have that take that first terrifying step of
Mhm.
transparency to say, here's something that's important to me. I want you to know about me and about us and about your trajectory in this
Mhm.
world. And move your kid a little bit further down the alphabet in their
Yeah.
understanding of how things look economically. That's the
Mhm.
relational component.
Okay.
The practical implementation component is I have a document we help our clients prepare, but you don't need anybody to
Hmm.
help you do this. I call it an estate plan supplement, which
Okay.
basically means, it's great to have your wills and your powers of attorney and
Hmm.
your trust, and it's in the filing cabinet, and maybe
Hmm.
even your spouse knows where it is, and maybe they'll know what to do when, God forbid, you get hit by a bus. But there's an even more practical guide
Hmm.
that's like, when Justin gets hit by a bus,
Hmm.
here's what you need to know. And it's like, here's the password for my phone.
Hmm.
Here's the code to the safe that's in the bedroom. Here's the two banks where we have safe deposit boxes, and there's some gold bullion there that you should know about. There's a thing buried in the backyard, whatever that stuff is. Here's the six people you should call. Here's the lawyer and their number.
Hmm.
Here's the CPA and their number. So that when that happens and you're in an emotional
Hmm.
overwhelm
Hmm.
and not thinking clearly, and you're like just, totally emotionally obliterated by this
Hmm.
perhaps tragic sudden loss of your loved one, you don't have to remember anything. You get that 1 or 2 page document. You're
Hmm.
like, okay, I can still open the cell phone
Hmm.
to like reply to texts, and I can open the safe, or I know where the bank, where the keys are to
Right.
that safety deposit box. So create an estate plan supplement,
Hmm.
put that with your other important
Hmm.
items, and have it available, and make sure that your spouse or loved ones know where it is.
Right.
And if for extra credit, there's these password sharing softwares.
Hmm.
I use one called One Password. LastPass
Hmm.
is another popular one, and there's
Right.
others. You can create a an essentially like an emergency contact where
Hmm.
someone can access your computer passwords. If you have, like I do, I'm sure you do, Mark, like a whole string of 74 different financial institutions with logins for all, bank accounts and retirement accounts and credit cards and other things, you can make it so that anyone, whoever your emergency contact is, can request access. And if you don't,
Hmm.
you essentially have right of refusal. So if
Hmm.
they try to get in, they request access, you can
Oh,
say no, no, no. But if you're in a coma, then you can't say no. And then they can get
yeah.
in to like make sure that the credit card gets paid.
Hmm.
So setting up, if you've never used one of those, I mean, frankly, it's good for security. It's good for
Yeah.
a lot of things, but it's also good for like
Hmm.
family continuity of financial
Hmm.
resources. So getting that set up and having that as sort of the
Hmm.
technological appendix to
Right.
your estate plan supplement is a way to care for your loved ones
Right.
in the event of a catastrophe
Hmm.
in your family.
Yeah. That's very good advice. So, wrapping things up, how do people get a hold of you? But why don't you give out your website or whatever other
Yeah.
contact information?
My website is APM, like Andrew Palmieri, wealth.com. That's
Mhm.
anesthesiology and pain management, was the original moniker there. You can email me, Justin at apm-wealth.com. You can also fill out the contact form if you want to correspond that way through the website. Mark, I am such a big fan of the content that you have put out over the
Mm.
years. So I really appreciate an opportunity to share this platform
This
and to
was
have this
fun. This was a
conversation.
lot of fun.
I
I
very
like
much
this.
see us as allies in the
Yeah.
same fight, pushing in the same direction,
Mm.
trying to help people in profoundly important
Yeah.
ways where good help is hard to find. So I appreciate you giving me a
Well,
chance to have this discussion with you today.
I appreciate you joining us. And I urge anybody who's listening who wants to reach out to Justin, please do. So, Justin, I'm going to stop the recording, but stick around. I'll say goodbye to you.